The Grand Conclave of the Cathar Imperium was a theater of silent, monolithic power. Obsidian walls, polished to a mirror finish, soared into an artificial nebula swirling within the vaulted ceiling, casting shimmering, ethereal light upon the tiers of assembled delegates. Each member, from the lowest scion of a frontier world to the highest Lord Commander, was encased in ceremonial armor of interlocking plates and filament, a tradition stretching back millennia to a time when debate was settled with sharpened steel rather than resonant oratory. At the heart of this cavernous space, suspended in a column of gravitic energy, was the strategic hollow display, a perfect, three-dimensional representation of the Cathar's dominion and the star-strewn void beyond. It was upon this map that all eyes were fixed, drawn to a single, stubbornly persistent mote of foreign light that had trespassed into their sovereign territory. It was a human ship. High Executor Valerius stood on the central dais, his own armor a burnished, unadorned obsidian that drank the light. His posture was one of sculpted stillness, but within the cold metal shell, his ancient mind churned with a disquiet he dared not show. He had overseen the Imperium for centuries, his reign marked by calculated expansion and brutal yet elegant consolidation. He had seen empires rise like fleeting sparks and die as silent embers. He understood the grammar of power, the syntax of fear, and the cold, hard logic of interstellar politics. Yet this human vessel, this singular, insignificant craft, defied all established precedents. It was an anomaly, a sentence written in a language he could not parse, and it made the old, predatory instincts within him stir with a feeling he had not known since his ascension: uncertainty. "It is an insult," boomed a voice from the upper tiers, the sound amplified by the chamber's acoustics until it was a physical pressure. Lord Commander Vorlag, his armor etched with the gilded symbols of countless victories, stepped forward, his massive form casting a long shadow. His fleet, the Blade of Cathar, was the instrument of the Imperium's will, a storm of warships that had shattered worlds and scattered civilizations. A single, decrepit vessel drifting into our domain as if it were unclaimed wilderness. Their long-range scans confirm our initial assessments. Its energy signature is archaic. Its hull composition is a patchwork of primitive alloys. The vessel radiates heat like a dying furnace. It is, by all our metrics, a relic, a museum piece. To allow it to proceed further is to project weakness, to invite others to test our borders. Murmurs of agreement, like the shifting of tectonic plates, rumbled through the conclave. Vorlag was a master of arousing their collective pride, a pride forged in conquest and tempered by an unshakable belief in their own supremacy. The Cathar did not see themselves as one species among many. They were the inheritors of the galaxy, the arbiters of cosmic order. Their technology was an art form, their warships were sculptures of death, their society a perfect hierarchy of strength. "The ship has not deviated from its course," Valerius stated, his voice a low counterpoint to Vorlag's thunder. It was calm, measured, carrying the weight of ages. He gestured a hand, and the hollow display magnified the human ship. It was ugly. There was no other word for it. Asymmetrical, scarred with what looked like micrometeoroid impacts accumulated over an impossibly long time, with no visible weapon emplacements or aesthetic considerations. It was a purely functional object, and its function was a mystery. It has not powered its weapons. It has not attempted to scan our worlds. It has ignored all of our automated hails, both warning and greeting. It simply moves, on a trajectory that will take it through the heart of our core systems. "Trajectory of deliberate provocation," Vorlag countered, his voice rising. "They mock us with their silence. They test our resolve with their pathetic display. Perhaps they believe their ship is so insignificant we will not deign to notice it. An ant crawling across the floor of this very conclave. But even an ant must be crushed when it strays where it does not belong, lest it signal to the rest of its colony that the way is clear." He turned his helmeted head, a gesture that encompassed every delegate. "We must make an example of this vessel. A swift, overwhelming demonstration of Cathar power. Let the humans, wherever they hide in their forgotten corner of the void, see the price of arrogance. Let the galaxy witness that the Imperium's borders are inviolable, etched in fire and enforced by the ghosts of those who dared to cross them." The nebula in the ceiling seemed to darken, its colors shifting from violet and gold to a deep, ominous crimson. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and heated metal, a psychosomatic response from the assembled warriors, their collective anticipation of violence becoming a palpable force in the room. Valerius felt it pressing in on him. He understood their perspective. It was the Cathar way. A challenge, no matter how small, must be met with disproportionate force. It was how they had carved out their empire and how they maintained it. But something about this situation felt different. It felt like a trap, but a trap of their own making. He let the silence stretch, forcing them to contemplate the void on the map. The little human ship was a speck of dust, yet it commanded the attention of the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. "And what if this is precisely what they intend?" Valerius asked, his voice cutting through the tension. "What if this vessel is not a probe nor an insult, but a question? They have been our neighbors for a standard cycle. We have observed them from afar. Their expansion has been slow, almost reluctant. They build, they consolidate, they explore, but they do not conquer. Their fleets are small, their military presence almost negligible compared to our own. They are a quiet, introspective species. Does this silent, ugly ship truly seem like an act of aggression from such a people? Introspection is the refuge of the weak," Vorlag spat. "They are quiet because they are powerless. They do not conquer because they cannot. This single ship is likely all they could muster, a desperate gamble to see if the old legends of Cathar might are exaggerated. We must show them, in no uncertain terms, that the legends do not do us justice." Another delegate, a wizened tactician from the Outer Rim, spoke up, her voice a dry rasp. "High Executor, Lord Commander, if I may, the ship's energy signature, while archaic, is also remarkably stable. Our analysts have noted that its power output has not fluctuated by a single decimal point since it entered our sensor range. For a vessel of that presumed age and technological level, such consistency is anomalous. It suggests a mastery of power generation that is either far more advanced than the ship's appearance would suggest, or it is something else entirely, something alien to our understanding of physics." Valerius nodded slowly, a subtle acknowledgement. "My point precisely. We are proceeding from a position of assumption. We assume their technology is primitive because its shell is old. We assume their intent is hostile because they are silent. We assume they are weak because they are few. The history of the void is littered with the corpses of empires that died of assumption." He turned his gaze back to Vorlag, the two most powerful beings in the Imperium locked in a battle of wills that was more significant than any fleet engagement. "You wish to send your fleet, Lord Commander? A grand fleet, I presume?" "The blade of Cathar stands ready," Vorlag confirmed, his tone laced with triumph. He knew he had won. The conclave was with him. The heart of the Imperium beat with the drum of war. It will be a lesson in aesthetics as much as in power. Our ships, perfect and lethal, will descend upon that piece of cosmic refuse. We will not destroy it outright. We will disable it, board it, and drag its carcass to Cathar Prime to be displayed in the Victory Archive, a monument to human folly. The chamber erupted in a low, resonant hum of approval. The decision was made. Valerius felt a cold dread coalesce in his core. He had led his people for centuries by balancing their inherent aggression with his own cautious wisdom. But today, the aggression had won. He saw the future unfurling before him, the Cathar fleet, a glorious needle of light surrounding the pathetic human ship. The ultimatum, the brief, satisfying burst of energy as the human ship was crippled, the triumphant return. But beneath that vision, another, darker one swam, a ghost of a premonition. A feeling of profound and terrible error. He raised a hand, and silence fell once more. "So be it," he said, the words tasting like ash. "Lord Commander Vorlag, you have your mandate. Send your fleet, but I want a live feed directed to this chamber. Every delegate will witness this lesson you intend to teach. They will see the might of the Cathar Imperium reaffirm its dominance, and they will bear witness to the consequences, whatever they may be." His gaze lingered on Vorlag, a silent warning that went unheeded by the triumphant warrior. "Proceed!" The Lord Commander bowed, a gesture of formal respect that barely concealed his arrogant satisfaction. On the hollow display, a cascade of golden icons detached from the core worlds, coalescing into a formidable armada that began to move with predatory grace toward the lone, silent human ship. The conclave watched, their collective spirit soaring with pride and anticipation. They were the Cathar. They were invincible. They were about to demonstrate that fact to the universe. High Executor Valerius remained still, a statue of obsidian and foreboding. He watched the golden icons converge on T. He single point of light, and he felt as if he were watching a hand reach out to touch a star, utterly oblivious to the fact that it was not a cold diamond, but a furnace of unimaginable power. He hoped, for the sake of his empire and the billion souls who depended on his wisdom, that his premonition was nothing more than the cautious fear of an old ruler. But in the deepest chambers of his ancient heart, he knew it was not. He was watching the beginning of the end. The blade of Cathar was more than a fleet. It was a statement. Each vessel was a work of art, a symphony of deadly intent and aesthetic perfection. Hulls of obsidian alloy, seamless and sharp, cut through the void, propelled by engines that bent spacetime into silent, elegant ripples. They did not burn or roar. They simply moved, displacing reality with a grace that belied their terrifying power. At their head was the asterisk will of the Imperium asterisk, Lord Commander Vorlag's flagship, a vessel so vast it generated its own subtle gravitational tides. As they materialized from hyperspace, they formed a perfect sphere of containment around the human ship, their weapon ports glowing with contained starlight, their very presence a declaration of absolute dominance. Aboard the asterisk will of the Imperium, Vorlag stood on his command dais, a mirror image of Valerius in the conclave, yet his spirit was aflame with righteous fury and pride. The main viewscreen showed the human ship in stark, unflattering detail. It was even uglier up close. The hull was a chaotic landscape of mismatched plates, ancient repair welds, and the deep scars of cosmic radiation. It looked less like a starship and more like an asteroid that had been crudely hollowed out and fitted with an engine. A wave of contempt washed over him. That this asterisk thing had caused such debate and consternation was an embarrassment. "Open a channel," Vorlag commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "All frequencies unencrypted, let the galaxy listen." The comms officer complied. A resonant Cathar chime echoed into the void, a sound designed to inspire awe and terror. Then Vorlag spoke. "Unidentified human vessel. You have violated the sovereign territory of the Cathar Imperium. You have ignored all attempts at communication. Your presence here is an act of aggression and will be treated as such. By the authority of the Grand Conclave and in the name of High Executor Valerius, I, Lord Commander Vorlag, Commander of the Blade of Cathar, order you to power down all systems immediately and prepare to be boarded. Compliance will be met with consideration. Resistance will be met with erasure." He finished the transmission and allowed the silence to hang in the void. He expected a frantic, terrified reply, perhaps a plea for mercy or a burst of incoherent data from a primitive computer struggling to translate his ultimatum. He was prepared to be magnanimous in his victory, to grant them the mercy of a quick, painless disabling of their ship. It was, after all, a lesson, not a slaughter. For a long moment there was nothing. The human ship just drifted, silent and inert. The Cathar crews on their perfect bridges watched, their expressions a mixture of pity and disdain. A junior officer on Vorlag's bridge let out a quiet scoff, quickly stifled. The mockery was universal. Then a voice came through the speakers. It was not what any of them expected. It was female, calm, and carried no trace of fear. There was no static, no distortion, just a pure, clear tone that spoke of a communications technology far more advanced than the ship's appearance suggested. The language was perfect, unaccented Cathar, a feat of translation that should have taken a supercomputer moments to achieve, not an instantaneous, fluid response. "This is Captain Eva Restover of the human vessel Vanguard Asterisk," the voice said. It was a voice that held a strange, deep weariness, like an ancient being who had seen too much. "Lord Commander Vorlag, we acknowledge your transmission. We mean you no harm. Our passage through your space is a matter of necessity. This vessel is on a mission of cosmic importance that supersedes territorial boundaries. We ask you, with all due respect to your authority and your people, to stand down and allow us to proceed. We will be out of your territory within one of your planetary rotations." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the response struck Vorlag like a physical blow. The quiet confidence, the lack of supplication, the utter dismissal of his authority, it was an insult far greater than their initial trespass. His face, hidden behind his helmet's visor, contorted into a mask of fury. "Your mission is irrelevant," he snarled into the comms. "Your necessity is a fiction. You are trespassers, and you have been given your final warning. Power down your systems now, or we will power them down for you." There was another pause, shorter this time. When Captain Rostova spoke again, her voice was tinged with something. Knew it was not fear, it was regret, a profound, soul-deep sorrow that chilled the air on Vorlag's bridge. "Lord Commander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried across the void with perfect clarity. "You do not understand what this ship is, I implore you. For the sake of your crews, for the sake of the history you seem to cherish, do not force our hand. There will be no second chances. There will be no wreckage to study. There will only be absence. Please, let us pass." This was too much. This was no longer a simple lesson. It was a direct challenge to his honor, to the very foundation of the Cathar Imperium. The human was threatening him, Lord Commander Vorlag, with a ship that looked like it had been salvaged from a junkyard. "Fire the forward disabling lances," Vorlag ordered, his voice cold and hard as diamond. "Target their propulsion and power core. I want that ship inert, and I want its captain brought to me." I wish to look her in the eye as I explain the concept of Cathar authority. The command was relayed. Across the sphere of warships, forward energy projectors, beautiful and terrible instruments of focused light, locked onto the Vanguard Asterisk. The Cathar watched, anticipating the satisfying flash, the cascade of sparks, the slow, silent death of the human ship systems. But the vanguard did not wait to be fired upon. It did not erect a shield. It did not charge a weapon. It did not maneuver. Instead, something happened to the space around it. For a fraction of a second, the stars visible through the viewscreen on the asterisk will of the Imperium seemed to bend. The light from distant nebulae warped as if viewed through a flawed lens. Then an event occurred for which the Cathar had no name, no precedent, and no defense. From the scarred, ancient hull of the human ship, a field of absolute nothingness expanded. It was not blackness, which is the absence of light. This was the absence of everything asterisk. It was not an explosion of energy, but an implosion of reality. The field expanded at an impossible speed, silent and inexorable. The Cathar ships at the forefront of the formation were the first to be touched by it. They did not explode. They did not break apart. They simply ceased to be. One moment, a proud Cathar destroyer, the asterisk glory of the void asterisk, was there, its lances glowing with imminent fire. The next, it was gone. Not just the ship, but the space it occupied. The sensors on the remaining ships did not register an energy signature, debris, or radiation. They registered a void, a perfect, symmetrical, and horrifying null space where 1 billion tons of matter and hundreds of Cathar souls had existed a heartbeat before. Panic, a concept almost alien to a Cathar bridge, erupted. Alarms shrieked as tactical displays turned to chaos. The field of uncreation continued to expand, perfectly spherical, utterly silent. It was not a weapon in any sense they understood. It was a surgical tool that excised pieces of the universe. It was a wave of pure entropy given form and direction. On the bridge of the asterisk will of the Imperium asterisk, Vorlag was frozen in disbelief. His mind, trained for every conceivable combat scenario, could not process what he was seeing. Report. He roared, the command cracking with his own shock. No energy readings, no radiation, they're just gone, a sensor officer screamed, his voice thin with terror. The field is still expanding, it's unmaking them. The sphere of nullity swept over another wave of warships. An entire squadron of cruisers, the pride of the fleet, vanished in an instant of silent, perfect annihilation. There was no light, no sound, just the chillingly calm and steady expansion of the void. It was like watching a divine hand erase a painter's mistakes. Evasive maneuvers, all ships break formation, full retreat, Vorlag bellowed, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a primal instinctual fear he had not felt since he was a frightened child. But it was too late. The Cathar ships were designed for grace and precision, not for panic, disorderly flight. The field was too fast. It was not traveling through space. It was rewriting space as it went. It touched the asterisk will of the Imperium. For a single eternal moment, Lord Commander Vorlag saw the forward half of his magnificent flagship disappear. Not explode, but simply vanish. He saw the stars through a cross-section of his own vessel, the decks, the corridors, the crew stations all sheared off with impossible precision. Then the field touched him. He felt no pain. He felt only a profound sense of dissolution, a feeling of being unwritten from the pages of existence, and then there was nothing. Back in the Grand Conclave on Cathar Prime, the delegates had watched in stunned silence. The live feed had shown the perfect formation, the arrogant ultimatum, the beginning of the energy charge. Then it had shown the impossible, the silent erasure, the golden icons on the main holody. Display began to wink out of existence, one by one, then in entire clusters. The blade of Cathar, the most powerful armada in the known galaxy, was being systematically dismantled in a matter of seconds. The feed from the flagship, the will of the Imperium, held for a moment longer than the others. It showed the terror on the bridge, the incomprehensible sight of warships ceasing to exist. Then the screen showed a wave of absolute nothingness consume the view, and then there was only static. Silence, a silence so deep and so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on the chamber. The nebula in the ceiling had turned a stark, deathly white. The assembled delegates, the most powerful warriors and politicians in the Imperium, were frozen in their ceremonial armor, their arrogance and pride replaced by a cold, soul-shattering terror. An entire grand fleet, the very symbol of their power, had been annihilated in less time than it took for a formal greeting. And it had been done without a single shot being fired. It had been done by a single old, ugly human ship. High Executor Valerius stood on his dais, his earlier premonition now a horrifying reality. He felt no vindication, only a deep, hollowing grief for the thousands of lives lost and a terrifying awe for the power he had just witnessed. He had been right. It was a question, and they had answered it incorrectly. The static on the main screen hissed for a long moment. Then it cleared. It was not a visual feed. It was an audio channel. Captain Eva Rostova's voice filled the silent chamber. It was the same calm, measured voice, but now it was layered with an almost unbearable sadness, a grief that seemed to echo Valerius's own. "We warned you," the human captain said, her voice resonating with the weight of a tragedy she had tried desperately to avoid. "We do not take pleasure in this. This vessel is not a warship. It is a warden. Its purpose is not conquest, but preservation. You have forced its hand. You have forced us to demonstrate the cost of unbridled aggression. We are now transmitting the black box data from your fleet. You will see we did not fire a weapon. We simply turned it off. We hope you will now listen." The hollow display shimmered, and a stream of data flowed into the Cathar archives. But no one was looking at the data. They were all staring at the single, solitary mote of light on the map. The human ship, the Vanguard *. It was no longer an insult. It was no longer a relic. It was a judgment. It was a god in the machine, a silent, unassuming power that had just redefined the fundamental laws of the universe for the entire Cathar Imperium. Valerius closed his eyes. The age of Cathar dominance was over. A new age had begun, an age of fear and of questions that now desperately needed to be answered. The silence in the Grand Conclave persisted for what felt like an eternity. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the ghosts of an annihilated fleet and the shattered remnants of an empire's pride. The delegates remained frozen, statues of polished obsidian, their minds struggling to reconcile millennia of undisputed dominance with the stark, silent horror they had just witnessed. The hollow display was now a graveyard. The space where the blade of Cathar had been was now just an empty void, punctuated by the single, unwavering light of the human ship Vanguard *. High Executor Valerius was the first to move. He raised his head, the motion slow and deliberate, the quiet rasp of metal on metal echoing in the vast chamber. He looked at the faces of his council, hidden behind their ornate helmets, but he could feel their collective shock, their terror, and the dawning, horrifying realization of their own insignificance. Lord Commander Vorlag's arrogance had led them to this moment, but they had all been complicit, blinded by the golden light of their own legacy. "Seal the chamber," Valerius commanded, his voice low but firm, cutting through the paralysis. "No one enters, no one leaves. What has happened here is a matter for the conclave alone. The Imperium must not descend into panic." The massive doors of the chamber slid shut with a deep, resonant thud, sealing them in with their failure and their fear. Valerius stepped down from the dais, his heavy footfalls the only sound. He walked to the edge of the suspended hollow display, looking down at the representation of the Vanguard *, as if it were a venomous creature he had foolishly underestimated. They called themselves wardens, a delegate whispered, the word alien and unsettling. "What is a warden, a jailer, a guardian?" "They are a power beyond our comprehension," another stated, his voice trembling. "To unmake matter, it is not technology. It is a violation of the natural order. It is the power of a creator used to destroy." Valerius raised a hand for silence. "They offered us a chance to listen, an offer we rejected at the cost of our finest fleet. We will not make that mistake again." He turned to his chief astrogator. "Open a direct, high-bandwidth channel to the human vessel, formal diplomatic protocols, encrypt it with the highest-level ciphers. I will speak to this Captain Rostova myself." The command sent a ripple of fresh apprehension through the chamber. To open a diplomatic channel now was an act of supplication, an admission of defeat. But there was no other choice. To respond with more violence would be suicide. They had thrown their sharpest spear at a god, and the god had not even flinched. The connection was established with unnerving speed. A new window opened on the hollow display. It remained an audio-only channel, a black void that seemed to stare back at them. "Human vessel Vanguard *. This is High Executor Valerius of the Cathar Imperium. I am the voice of the Grand Conclave. I wish to speak with Captain Rostova." The pause was brief. "High Executor," the now familiar, weary voice replied. "I am here, I am listening." Valerius took a breath, the recycled air of his helmet feeling thin and inadequate. He had negotiated the surrender of starfaring civilizations, dictated terms to vanquished kings, and debated philosophy with ancient, crystalline beings. But he had never felt so utterly outmaneuvered, so completely at a disadvantage. "Captain," he began, choosing his words with the care of a sapper navigating a minefield. "We have witnessed a demonstration of your vessel's capabilities, a capability that redefines our understanding of everything. You said your purpose was preservation, yet you have just committed an act of annihilation on a scale that defies description." "It was not an act of annihilation," Rostova's voice corrected gently, but with a firmness that brooked no argument. "It was a necessary and deeply regrettable act of de-escalation. Your fleet was prepared to kill, to destroy. We were prepared only to defend our mission. The technology you witnessed is not a weapon, High Executor. It is a tool, A reality shaper. It does not explode matter. It reverts it to a state of pure, undifferentiated energy. A quantum reset. It is painless, instantaneous, and absolute. We used it because it was the only option that would guarantee the cessation of your attack without a prolonged, brutal conflict that would have cost even more lives. The cold, clinical explanation was more terrifying than any declaration of war. They spoke of unmaking fleets as a surgeon might speak of removing a tumor. Valerius felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "And what is this mission?" he pressed, the central question upon which their entire future now hinged. "What cause is so vital that it justifies passage through the heart of a sovereign empire and the de-escalation of its military?" There was a longer silence this time. Valerius could almost feel the weight of the decision being made on the other end of the connection. Finally, the black window on the hollow display flickered and an image resolved. It was not a grand bridge or a tactical display. It was a simple, stark room, and in it stood a woman. The image was a shock to the Cathar. They had seen depictions of humans, but this was the first time they had seen one in a position of such immense power. She was not a fearsome warrior. She was small by their standards, her face pale and lined with a weariness that seemed etched into her very bones. She wore a simple, dark uniform devoid of rank or adornment, but her eyes held the calm, steady gaze of someone who had stared into abysses far deeper than the vacuum of space. This was Captain Eva Rostova. "High Executor," she said, her image now conveying the same profound sorrow her voice had carried. "To answer your question, I must show you why humanity is the way it is. Why we have vessels like the Vanguard Asterisk. Why we no longer seek to conquer, but only to contain." The view behind her changed, replaced by a swirling vortex of historical data, images, and simulations. It was a brutal, horrifying lesson in human history. She showed them a past far more ancient than the Cathar had ever imagined. A time when humanity was not a quiet, introspective species, but a rampant, aggressive empire, much like the Cathar themselves. They had conquered, they had expanded, they had fought wars that made the Cathar's own conflicts look like minor skirmishes. Their weapons had not been elegant lances of light, but brutal, terrifying forces that tore the fabric of spacetime itself. "We almost destroyed everything," Rostova said, her voice a near whisper as images of dying stars and shattered planets filled the display. "We fought a civil war that was not fought over territory, but over reality itself. We developed weapons that could rewrite physical laws, erase timelines, and unmake matter. The Vanguard Asterisk is one of the last relics of that era. It is not a new invention. It is an ancient and terrible sword that we, as a species, swore nie." Ver to draw again. The conclave watched, mesmerized and horrified. The humans were not a young race. They were an ancient, fallen empire, survivors of a self-inflicted apocalypse. Their quiet nature was not weakness, it was penance. Their reluctance to expand was not timidity, it was a self-imposed quarantine. "After our great collapse," Rostova continued, "we dedicated ourselves to finding and containing the horrors we had unleashed. The echoes of our old wars still reverberate through the cosmos. Rogue AIs, self-replicating temporal weapons, pockets of unstable reality. The Vanguard Asterisk is a warden ship. We hunt these relics of our own arrogance. We contain them. We preserve the galaxy from our own past." She looked directly at them, her gaze piercing through the screen, through their helmets, and into their very souls. "Your empire, High Executor, for all its might and pride, is young. You practice a form of warfare that, to us, is like children playing with sharpened sticks. We did not want to involve you. We did not want to reveal ourselves, because the burden of this knowledge, the knowledge of what is truly possible, is a poison. And the existence of a power like the Asterisk Vanguard invites challenge, fear, and escalation. We have seen this cycle before. It ends in fire and silence." Valerius felt the entire foundation of his worldview crumble. The Cathar, who saw themselves as the pinnacle of evolution, were infants compared to these quiet, scarred, penitent beings. Their greatest fleet had been destroyed by a tool from a war so ancient the Cathar had not yet even discovered fire. "Why did you not simply tell us this from the beginning?" Valerius asked, his voice heavy with the weight of this new understanding. "Would you have believed us?" Rostova countered softly. "Would the commander of your fleet, a man who called our ship a piece of cosmic refuse, have listened to a story of fallen gods and ancient sins? Or would he have seen it as a trick, a desperate lie from a cornered primitive? We know your psychology, High Executor. We have observed you. We knew that only a demonstration of power, a power so absolute it defied challenge, would force you to listen. I regret the necessity of it more than you can possibly imagine. Every soul on those ships is a weight upon my own." The sincerity in her voice was undeniable. She was not a conqueror gloating over her victory. She was a warden, mourning a necessary execution. It was in that moment that High Executor Valerius made a decision that would alter the course of Cathar history forever. He was not Vorlag. He would not let pride be the tombstone of his people. He saw not a threat in Captain Rostova, but a reflection of a future his own species might one day face if they continued on their path. He saw wisdom born of unimaginable suffering. "Captain Rostova," Valerius said, his voice resonating with a new authority, one born not of dominance but of understanding. "You have taken our fleet, you have taken our pride, but you have given us something far more valuable in return, perspective. You speak of your burden of being wardens of the galaxy. It is a burden you should no longer have to carry alone." He stepped forward into the full view of Rostova's display. "The Cathar Imperium has spent millennia honing its skills for war. Our fleets, our warriors, our strategies, they are without peer in conventional conflict. We are proud, we are strong, and we are, as you have so brutally demonstrated, also ignorant, but we are not incapable of learning." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the stunned conclave. "We offer you an alliance, not as supplicants but as partners, your wisdom, your ancient knowledge, and your tools. Our strength, our resources, our reach. Together, let us become the wardens you were meant to be. Let us preserve the galaxy not as a human penance but as a joint responsibility." The offer hung in the air, a proposal so radical it bordered on heresy. An alliance with the beings who had just effortlessly annihilated their greatest military asset. But Valerius saw the bigger picture. The humans were not the enemy. The real enemies were the ghosts of their past, the horrors they were hunting. And those horrors, sooner or later, would threaten the Cathar as well. Captain Rostova's expression changed. The deep, ingrained weariness was momentarily replaced by a flicker of something else. Surprise, and perhaps a faint glimmer of hope. She looked at Valerius, truly seeing him for the first time, not as an obstacle or a threat, but as a potential ally. "High Executor," she said slowly, the idea taking root. "An alliance, we have been alone for so long, the thought had not even occurred to us." "Then let it occur now," Valerius replied. "The Cathar do not bow, but we are not too proud to stand beside a worthy equal. You have shown us a greater truth about the universe. Allow us to help you defend it." The decision was his to make, but as he glanced back at the delegates, he saw not dissent, but a dawning awe and acceptance. They had witnessed the divine, and their perspective had been irrevocably altered. They were no longer the masters of the galaxy. They were simply a part of it, and it was a part they now understood was far more dangerous and mysterious than they had ever conceived. Rostova held his gaze for a long moment, a silent communion passing between the ancient, weary human and the ancient, humbled Cathar. "We accept High Executor Valerius," she said finally, her voice firm. "Let a new age begin." As she spoke, the image on the main hollow display shifted again. The map of the Cathar Imperium remained, but it was now overlaid with new data streamed directly from the Vanguard asterisk. It was the true reason for their urgent passage. "This is why we could not be delayed," Rostova explained, her tone shifting to one of grim seriousness. The display zoomed out far beyond the borders of the Imperium to the uncharted edges of the galaxy. There in the deep void between spiral arms was a phenomenon that made the Vanguard's own power seem insignificant. It was not a fleet. It was not an empire. It was a creeping, silent decay. A wave of wrongness. Star systems on the map were shown winking out of existence, not in a flash of novolite, but in a slow, sickening fade. Suns cooled, planets crumbled into dust, and entire regions of space went dark, their light simply ceasing to travel. Sensor readings, translated into Cathar understanding, showed that the fundamental constants of physics were being altered within this zone. It was a tide of entropy, but an unnatural, directed one. A cancer eating away at the fabric of reality itself. "We call it the silent fade," Rostova said, her voice a grave whisper that filled the conclave. "It is not a relic of our past wars. It is something else, something older. We have been tracking its progress for centuries. It is slow, but it is accelerating. Our mission was not to pass through your territory, High Executor. Our mission was to reach a point in space directly in your core worlds to install a deep reality sensor. The Cathar Imperium sits at a unique cosmological node, a place where the echoes of the universe's creation are still detectable. We hope to get a clearer reading on the origin of the fade from here." The delegates stared at the map, their earlier conflict with humanity, the loss of their fleet, all of it shrinking into utter insignificance. They had been squabbling over a single room in a house that was slowly, silently burning down around them. The human ship had not been an invader. It had been a physician rushing to diagnose a terminal illness. "The reality-shaping tool of the Vanguard asterisk," Rostova continued. "The one you witnessed, we did not invent it for war. We built it as a desperate attempt to understand and perhaps counteract the fade. It operates on the same principles, excising reality on a microscale. It was a scalpel designed to study a cancer. You forced us to use it as a sword. High Executor Valerius stepped closer to the hollow display, his gaze fixed on the encroaching darkness at the galaxy's edge. The true scale of existence had been laid bare before him. His empire, his people, their entire history was a fleeting moment in the face of this cosmic, existential threat. The humans were not their enemies. They had never been. They were the first watchmen on the wall, sounding a warning that the Cathar had been too arrogant to hear. "Captain Ristova," Valerius said, his voice imbued with a new, profound purpose. "Your mission is now our mission. The resources of the Cathar Imperium are at your disposal. Our fleets will guard your wardens. Our scientists will work with yours. Together we will face this silent fade." On the screen, Captain Eva Ristova gave a small, solemn nod. For the first time, a faint trace of a smile touched her lips, not of joy, but of relief. The relief of no longer being alone. The grand conclave of the Cathar Imperium, which had begun in a debate of arrogant pride, now stood in humbled, unified silence. They looked at the map, no longer seeing borders or territories, but a single, shared reality, a fragile tapestry of existence threatened by a silent, encroaching nothingness. The old, ugly human ship was still there, a single point of light, but it was no longer a mystery. It was a beacon. It was a promise. It was hope, floating in an infinite and suddenly very dark void. And for the first time in their long, proud history, the Cathar understood the true meaning of fear, and the profound, terrifying and beautiful burden of being alive in a universe that was far grander and more dangerous than they had ever dreamed.